Sorry, Dante. I'm back in this bitch.
Hey everybody, it is a very exciting day because Devil May Cry 5 is almost here, but also because I am speaking with Matt Walker, producer at Capcom. And before we get started, before we get talking about Devil May Cry and getting all excited, please tell me what your role within Capcom is, what your history with Capcom is, and what your history with Devil May Cry is.
Sure, cool, man. Yeah, so like you said, I'm a producer. I'm a producer on Devil May Cry 5. I've been on this title since 2015 now, so it's been a long time. I've been at Capcom since 2010.
Yeah.
The first thing I did at Capcom was a little title called Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. And I did a lot of production and coordination on that. And then after that, I did some stuff, and I worked on Resident Evil Revelations 2. This time I was called a production manager, and basically I did a lot of production work. I was basically kind of an assistant producer of sorts. And then flash forward to this title. Between that and then, I worked on Monster Hunter World, and kind of at the same time, I started working on this, like I said, in about 2015 or so. And I've been doing all kinds of production on this since 2015. Been managing a lot of the asset creation, like models and animations and stuff. Also going back and forth with a lot of different people, doing a lot of approvals. These days, a lot of my job is going back and forth with people all over the world about what our marketing and PR schedules are going to be, approving different marketing assets, and then approving like licensed assets and stuff too. So like me and the senior producer Okabe-san and Itsuno-san, all three of us basically tag team to look at every single licensed Devil May Cry item that comes out. And, you know, if there's any kind of feedback we have, like, you know, this change or we think this would be better, then we do a lot of that. So basically when I'm going on trips like this, you know, and I'm away from Japan overnight, I get 100 emails all with that kind of stuff. Yeah.
It sounds like your job has evolved and changed a lot over the time that you've been at Capcom, but I think the thing that I can't quite let go of yet is that the first thing you were involved in was Operation Raccoon City. Not exactly the most beloved Resident Evil game that has come out. So just kind of with your first exposure to this company working on this thing and then the reaction to it, was that like a difficult thing at all to process, or were you so busy that you just kind of moved on to the next thing? Like, how do you kind of, I guess in a general sense, handle the highs and lows of critical and fan reaction to the stuff that you're working on?
Man, I mean, well, so my whole life I loved Japanese games. And so really my life plan was always like, I want to learn Japanese, and I want to move to Japan, and I want to work in Japanese games. I want to basically do what I can to support these people that I think are amazing creators. And so that's kind of how I got into production. But, you know, I got into Capcom in 2010. And so it was just like, at that point, I'd finally realized my life dream, you know, like, oh my God, I'm working at Capcom in Japan, you know? So yeah, Operation Raccoon City was certainly like this kind of like, it was a completely different thing for the series, right? Yeah. And it ended up being kind of a one-off, right? We never really went back to that. But at the time, I was just so excited, like, oh my God, we're trying all this new stuff. You figure that was right after DMC Devil May Cry was announced. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, this is really poignant for Capcom to go, look, we have this amazing series, and in order to make it something that hopefully could be more relatable worldwide, let's work with some people outside the company. Let's work with these people that have this amazing sense of style in ninja theory, and combine that with what we know to be good action game design by having Ichino-san work directly with them constantly, you know, and the team working with them constantly in Japan. So we were doing all this new stuff. We had like Lost Planet 3 was something that we were just like kind of getting off the ground. I was excited about that. You know, I think when the game came out, and yeah, it wasn't reviewed well, I mean, we were lucky because it sold pretty well. And there were like fans that were like, look, I get what you're going for and I like this. And I understand why a lot of people didn't like it, you know. There were a lot of people that they had a very specific idea of what Resident Evil should be. And even Resident Evil 6 came out after that, right? And Resident Evil 6 was something too that I think a lot of people, especially in the media, were like, look, this isn't what I want from Resident Evil, you know, understandably. We try to take feedback like that when we make something, and we try to learn from it. Because if we don't, well, then we're going to die off as a company, right? Because then we're just not being relevant, and we're not paying attention to what people want, right? I think when we do put something out that doesn't review well, it can be a letdown for us to an extent, you know, on the dev side, but we do try to take it as a learning opportunity. And of course, when something is reviewed well, like, you know, when Monster Hunter World came out and we got like, I think it was like a 91 Metacritic, I think. Then Resident Evil 2 came out, I got a 92 Metacritic, I think, right? Like, it's like, oh my God, after working on this title for like 4 or 5 years or whatever it is, finally, like, we have this validation. Not only validation, but honestly, we're just happy because people like our thing, you know?
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
So taking kind of those ideas of listening to people and trying to find new ways to be relevant, I think that's something that makes Devil May Cry 5 so interesting. Is this is a series that started all the way back in the early days of the PS2 and has changed so much. I mean, it changed so much with Devil May Cry 2 and 3 and 4 introducing Nero, and then you had DMC from Ninja Theory, and now you're bringing it back after a long absence. How do you, I guess, just stylistically make it exciting and fresh and feel new while also, you know, trying to keep it true to something that has changed so much throughout the years?
Well, I mean, in terms of making it new, there were kind of two big things at play here. The first was the executive producer, Takeuchi-san, you know, who has been at the company since, I think, 93. Like, one of the first things he did was he made the backgrounds in the Super Nintendo port of Street Fighter 2.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
That's legendary.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Dude, I love that. I work with people like this every day. You know, like that's why I live, you know,
Yeah.
so I can like hear stories from guys like him, like Itsuno-san. Itsuno-san started in 94, you know, and he's made all these amazing games too. And Takeuchi-san said, look, great, let's make Devil May Cry 5, but I want it to look amazing. I want it to look like something that you bring it to E3, you bring it to Gamescom, you bring it somewhere, you put that poster up, and it should be able to be something that you put it next to like a Call of Duty. You put it next to, God, you know, the biggest titles out there, Last of Us, Spider-Man, you know, what have you, you know, Forza, you know, these titles that look amazing, that are groundbreaking, that it should be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with those. And so we said, all right, then we're going to take RE Engine, and we're going to take its PBR-based rendering, and we're going to make the most real photorealistic thing we can, but still make it feel like a proper action game. So that was the first thing. The second thing was Itsuno-san, when he decided he wanted to make a Devil May Cry 5, he had a couple very specific ideas in mind. He said, all right, I think it would be cool then if we had a new character. Because we had a new character in Devil May Cry 4 and Nero. We need a new one this time. The new character can't be the same as like Nero and Dante, because what's the point then? And so he said, he had the idea for V. He said, what if I have a character where you take the portion that you have to protect and you separate that from the portion that attacks in these demon and familiars that he has. And now you have it in the same framework. You still have the melee button is still the melee attack in Shadow. The long range button is still the long range attack in Griffin. And then you still got Devil Trigger, which is calling Nightmare. So from a control scheme, it's the same thing. But it's a completely different kind of approach to the action game, because now you have these portions that are separated, and you have to really keep your eye on the whole screen. Now you have to worry about, okay, you have to look at V's over here. You have to be cognizant of the fact that his familiars are over here, and then that all these enemies are over here as well. And you do have to kind of keep your eye on the screen in a slightly different way. And then he had very specific ideas for the gameplay in terms of Nero as well. And he was really happy with when we had Nero's demon arm, you know, and what that brought to the gameplay. And a lot of people, he knew that a lot of fans were really happy about how that worked out. So he thought, how are people going to feel then if I just take that away from them? I'm going to take that away, and then in its place, I'm going to have these devil breakers. And then finally, he had very specific ideas for the story that, you know, we can't spoil, but very specific ideas for the story. And okay, Team DMC is being obliterated by this new enemy at the beginning of the game. What's going to happen throughout the game? With all that stuff together, that provided the core for what DMC5 became.
When I play games, there tend to be a lot of kind of assumptions you can make about the arsenal that you have, right? If you're playing a shooter, you're very likely going to have a shotgun or multiple assault rifles, that sort of thing. In Devil May Cry 5, this is something that you guys have already revealed very early on. Dante uses a motorbike as a weapon. how does that happen? Like, what is the creative process like for just coming up with that idea and then actually implementing it in a way that makes sense with all of the other things, both old and new, that character can already do?
I mean, it's really an important part of the process, and because there's a history with this series, right? There's a history. We have like Nevin in Devil May Cry 3, which is a guitar that you fight with, right? And what it comes down to is Itsuno-san's like, all right, look, Devil May Cry, the way he sees this as a franchise where it should have elements that like basically teenagers would think are cool. That's really what he goes for. Guitars are cool to teenagers, right?
Yeah. Well, to everyone.
Yeah. Right? Oh, yeah, well, sure, right? Right? But like, it's actually, the reason I say teenagers, because when we explain it in Japanese, we use this concept called chuni. Chuni, which is very specifically like basically stuff that like teenagers think are cool.
Sure.
And so we talk about the chuni, like Itsuno-san himself, he's very chuni. He likes chuni stuff. And in bringing these weapons, like I said, we had the guitar. It was time to create new weapons for this series. One thing that he's always wanted to do is actually use a motorcycle. In DMC2, they wanted to. And you'll notice there's a motorcycle in DMC2.
Yes.
That's kind of a remnant of that.
Okay.
DMC3, they're like, all right, we're going to try to get this motorcycle in here this time. What ends up happening? They don't have the kind of time to implement a proper motorcycle weapon, but there's a cutscene. There's a cutscene where, as Dante is falling down the tower, he's got a motorcycle and he's using it like nunchucks. That's also a remnant of trying to get the motorcycle in there.
Gotcha.
And then finally, DMC5, we're like, we're doing this motorcycle. So how do we do this? And basically all kinds of different people from the team, people that have worked on the series in the past too, they all provide different ideas for what the weapons are going to be. So like, for instance, there's one weapon that they considered doing, at the time, figure skating was a big thing in Japan. What if we do a figure skating weapon?
Sure.
That didn't work out. But there's this guy, he was the lead animator on some of the DMC games. He just had a picture of Dante holding this double sword, double blade motorcycle, essentially. And then as soon as we saw it, we're like, that's it. That's what we're going for. That's going to be the motorcycle weapon. So that's how Cavalier came about.
Interesting. Yeah. So this is not something that was like, okay, you know, spur of the moment, here it is. It's interesting to hear kind of the history behind it and how they tried to implement it in the past. But Devil May Cry, I think, is most famous for how thoughtful it is with its systems that kind of underpin the combat and make it work and make it function and make you feel cool for doing it and make it look cool. And something that I feel sometimes when I'm watching other people play games, and I know for a fact other people feel this way when they watch me sometimes, is it can be frustrating when somebody's not getting something or they're ignoring it just because you have that information and you kind of want to reach through the screen and help them. So as somebody who's been working on Devil May Cry 5 since 2015, is it hard watching people be bad at Devil May Cry?
No. I mean, it's our job. It's the game designer's job to give these tools to people. Yeah. And they should do, this is going to be my personal game design philosophy, but I really feel like you should give people these toys that they can play with and let them do whatever they want. If they're happy, that's what's important, you know? And that's where the real interesting stuff is going to come out. Like I personally love it when like you find bugs in video games and you can exploit those for speed runs and stuff. Like sure, that wasn't intended, but that ends up opening this new level of gameplay to people, you know? And so either way, our game designers, they work really hard on providing all these tools to people. So none of us really feel like upset if people aren't using something. Really, the idea should be that they use what they want. Now, if there's something where they really need to use something in order to beat the game or beat something, then it's on us to make sure that we communicate in a way that is not obvious to the player, but is natural for the player. Sure. To get them to use it and get past that so that they're happy with what they're doing. I think really that's kind of what game design is all about, you know?
Sure. You talk about like letting people enjoy it the way that they want to. Just from Matt Walker's perspective, what is your favorite character to play as in DMC5? And since you've been working on the game, has that changed over time?
Oh yeah, that's changed. That's changed, and it kind of changes pretty often. It's almost like the last character I used. It tends to be like I really like using that one, but like, I mean, I've had times where like I love V because of the risk reward that we've implemented for him. You know, the fact that okay, you have the enemies, you want to keep the enemies at bay, but you still got to go in to give him that final attack. You know, and finish him off. Dante, I love like switching between the styles and like pulling off those Royal Guard perfect executions, you know. But I think right now my favorite is Nero, and it's the Devil Breakers. You know, it's the Devil Breakers, and actually it's that wire snatch move, being able to pull enemies in. I gotta say, man, I didn't play DMC4 until a little later. I bought it. It was the first game I bought for PS3 when I bought my PS3, but I didn't actually finish the game until later, a bit later. And then when I went back through it and played it, that snatch mechanic, using the Devil Bringer to bring the enemy to you, Devil May Cry really is all about grouping. You know, it's all about grouping these enemies. You know, you basically want to try to have one enemy that you're slashing, and you want to try to keep the other ones away from you so that you're not getting hit, right? Having the Devil Bringer to bring enemies to you completely, it gives you this tool that not only does it make that combat easier to kind of approach, but it's such a fresh thing. For an action game, you know? And as stupid as it sounds, I don't know if it's been done in other action games like this. I mean, yeah, we've had it in fighting games, right? We've had it, you know, like, God, in Mortal Kombat, Scorpion was really the first character that I can remember to have this kind of move that not only brings the enemy over, but then also stuns the enemy, right? Fun fact, this mechanic actually kind of stemmed from that kind of, it was actually for an idea for a fighting game. It's the Devil Bringer.
Okay.
It was something where Itsuno-san and another guy that has worked with him for years, they were like, what if we did this kind of thing in a fighting game? Wouldn't this be kind of cool? And they ended up not making a fighting game. They made the Devil May Cry 4. Like, let's do this. Let's do this for Devil May Cry 4. So that Snatch, and then the Devil Breakers. The idea that, okay, you can't just switch between Devil Breakers on the fly. I know a lot of people are upset about that, and I understand that, and I see where they're coming from. All I can say is what we try to do is we try to design the gameplay in a way that there's differentiation between Nero and Dante. And so Dante, yes, his thing is he's got all these options at his disposal that you can switch between at any time. Nero, we've tried to design his gameplay, his experience, his fights, so that the interesting part is thinking about that loadout for the Devil Breakers ahead of time. Strategizing. Okay, I'm going to start out this level now. What should I bring into the level? What do I hope to finish the level with? And then giving people the chance to use these Devil Breakers in succession. I think one thing we've seen is people are a little hesitant to break the Devil Breakers, you know, to use the break age moves essentially. And I know I was at first too, but the gameplay opens up when you just kind of succumb to that. You know what? I'm going to lose this, and that's okay. Because we've designed it that way. Like, we put Devil Breakers throughout the stages. So like, oh, look, oh, you don't have one right now? Here you go. Do that. Or, oh, you're about to jump into this battle here. Oh, there happens to be a Devil Breaker right before this battle. You should pick that up. And then look, it's, you know, the game designers, they're like, oh, this is very much a situation where this is going to work really well if you use it this way. And when you get that, and then you just kind of like succumb to, I'm just going to use this. I'm going to use this up. It feels so good to play with Nero, to do the combos, and then when you have like a D, maybe a D or a B or something, and then you pull off one of the break age moves, and then your style rank jumps up there. It goes up to like S or something, and then the music kicks in. Oh, dude, like that just feels so good.
And if you're ending the battle, it just goes in slow motion, goes in, and you feel amazing.
And just that UI for the style rank is up there, like just to like show you like one last time. Yeah, you just triple S that.
It's really fascinating because you talked about how the importance of grouping, and I think part of what makes Devil May Cry so satisfying is you learn that without the game kind of explicitly telling you, where you're like, oh, I'm getting more style by hitting more enemies at once. I should try to, you know, group things together in such a way where I can do as much damage to as many people as possible. And it's like the game is just kind of reinforcing that through its own ranking system, and it's kind of the same thing with the Devil Breakers, where there's that layer of improvisation where you're like, oh man, like I'm down a couple Devil Breakers, there's this one on the ground, I don't know what it does, let's figure it out, but it was put there for a specific reason. It's going to be useful here if you can figure it out. What's interesting to me about Devil May Cry 5 is the way that Devil Trigger kind of took off. just immediately. And yeah, the song, yes. Talking about the song, it feels like it has kind of become a very core part of the identity of Devil May Cry, and just the way that people have rallied around it. Did you know, I guess, that the song was going to have that much impact? Like, did you kind of have that faith in the song? And for all of the characters, picking the music, picking what's going to identify them, like, what is that process like, figuring that out?
Oh, man. All right, well, let's see here. Before we talk about the process, yeah, well, let's talk about the first part of the question. It was so cool. So yesterday, I got to Japan, or I got here from Japan on Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. And then we had it planned so that we had a thing that we had to film in the morning on Monday. And then in the afternoon, we went to the Microsoft store at Century City, and we did this fan event. Mm-hmm. And our marketing manager, Charlene, got a hold of the people of Ali and Casey Edwards, who, you know, wrote and performed the song. And she's like, hey, you know, we're going to be in LA. Do you want to come, like, be at this event with us? And God bless them, they said yes. They came, and that made the event so much better.
Sure.
And people got a chance to ask them directly how they felt about the song and stuff like that. So very specifically, somebody asked that same question to them. And Casey, who, you know, wrote the song, he was like, you know, I was really worried. He was like, I really did not know if people were going to like it. I was really worried that people were going to crap on it, you know, and they weren't going to like what I made. And we've been working on this game for like 4 years. Mm-hmm. And on the dev side, you know, for a long time, like, you figure, like, we haven't finished the other songs yet, but we have Devil Breaker. So we have Devil Breaker in the build, and we're just constantly hearing Devil Breaker. God, I just said Devil Breaker. Devil Trigger. Right?
The people know what you mean. They understand.
We had Devil Trigger in the build. We had Devil Trigger in the build. And we would play the game. And I think I was pretty confident that it was going to be something that at least fans were going to enjoy, because, first of all, I never got sick of the song, even though I have it, right?
You've probably heard it
exactly
so many times.
Exactly. Between just us having the build on our kit on our computers, just constantly playing it, and God, when we're doing the trailers, you know, we used it in like most of the trailers, right? Yeah. So we use it in most of the trailers. You would think that I'd be sick of the song, but I never got sick of it. And I always thought it was catchy. So I was always kind of expecting that, like, at least somebody's gonna like this. But then what really got me was when I started, like, understanding the lyrics, and I was like, wait a minute, there's all these references to the other games in there that, like, and they're not forced, you know? Yeah. They're not forced. Like, certain songs, like, when you write a song specifically for a game and you try to force references in there, it does feel forced, but, like, they're not forced at all. And maybe it's partly because there's, like, this balance of, like, poppiness to it, like, to an extent, you know? But getting those references in there, it was like, oh my God, there's like another level to this, you know? And oh my God, Casey understands all this stuff, you know? So that was really cool. In terms of deciding on the music for, like, okay, what kind of music is each character going to have? Itano-san worked with the sound team. The main composer is a guy named Kota Suzuki. And they kind of went back and forth, and they decided that they wanted each of the characters to have kind of a song that it seems like that character would listen to. So that's why Nero's song is like that with Devil Trigger. That's why Dante's song is a little more hardcore, you know. It's a little more something that a guy a little older might listen to, you know. Sure. And V's song is something completely different, right? You
mentioned kind of at the beginning of this interview that you guys need to pay attention to what people want and the feedback they're giving you in order to succeed. And I feel like Capcom has recently, within the last couple of years, seen some very, very, very bright spots with Monster Hunter World, which you referenced, and Resident Evil 2, which just came out. And now, you know, you have Devil May Cry 5 coming out. But between these different teams and these different people working on these games, how much does the success of one thing, even if it's in a completely different genre, influence, if at all, like your future projects and what's going on ahead? Like, are you just kind of being like, no, this is what we want to do, that's cool that they're doing it over there, or are you guys taking ideas from each other, or just even methods of communication about how to sell these things to people? What is that conversation like?
I feel like sales is probably like a separate thing. I mean, on the dev side, we try to really just focus on the product, you know. And then there are different people that deal with the sales stuff. You know, RE Engine is the backbone of RE7, RE2, and Devil May Cry 5, you know? Right. So we share the technology. And that does have this great effect of, because we're working on one thing, so like working on one thing on RE2, because it's in the engine then, after putting it in there through RE2, on DMC5, we're able to go, oh man, that's really good, great, we're going to be able to use that now. In terms of exchanging ideas, surprisingly, even though the teams are not far apart, the Devil May Cry 5 team is on the 11th floor of R&D Building 1, and then the RE2 team, I think, was on floor 9, so just like 2 floors from each other. We're super close to each other. There's all kinds of people that, like, a lot of people, the way a lot of the devs work is, in Japan, it's this society where you tend to get right out of college and you get into a company and kind of work there for the rest of your life, right? That's still kind of like the way that things work, even though it's changing. But you end up having a lot of people that, like, okay, these people got into the company the same year. And so, yeah, they're working on separate projects, but they're good friends because they were what we call doki in Japanese. They were, they got in the same year. So, yeah, people that certainly talk a lot, but surprisingly, there isn't a whole lot of, like, back and forth where, like, okay, because this person was talking to this person on a different team, now something that we did in RE2, now we're going to do that in DMC5. Sure. They do kind of consider their games pretty separate in that respect. Yeah.
Interesting. Games, the way that games are sold has changed so much, and Devil May Cry has been around for a very long time, and something that you guys introduced in Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition is the ability to purchase items if you want to. You don't need to, but it's something that is there, and that's another thing that you're doing in Devil May Cry 5. How do you do that? Like, how do you introduce this sort of monetization in a way that doesn't feel gross, I guess, that doesn't feel like it's, taking something away from the series?
Yeah, the first thing, Devil May Cry 5 especially, the Devil May Cry games, Isano-san, he's an old school gamer, right? Mm-hmm. There's this documentary that we put out a couple days ago by some people that work in Japan, they're French people that work in Japan, and it's called Toko Toko TV. So they highlighted Itsuno-san and then Kadoi-san and Ampo-san, the RE2 directors, for this episode that came out a couple days ago. And you see really in there just how much Itsuno-san's kind of gaming heritage really rings back to old school experiences. So his game design philosophy is really stemmed in that. He always approaches the game design from the idea that, okay, this is going to be that kind of old school experience. So going through the game, at least the first time, this is how it should work. This is how it should be balanced so that people shouldn't have such a tough time that they need to, like, buy, extras if I put it in there. But this time around, we have the microtransactions with the red orbs, for instance. And that's something that he put in there, again, to give people choice. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to, if we did our jobs right, which I'm pretty confident we have, you should be able to play through that game and not have to buy red orbs, But if you want to give people the option to do that and to kind of give them a choice that, with any luck, from a game designer point of view, they think about that. Like, do I really want to spend money on this? Or do I want to just play the game and get it that way? I personally think that we've balanced it in a way that people will choose just play it through the game, But Itsuno-san wanted to give people choices for that. The other stuff we have is the deluxe content. The deluxe content that comes out the same day as the game. And that's a bunch of extras, Okabe-san, the senior producer, he always wanted to make sure that you could buy the standard edition of the game and get all the story content. There's all the content in there that you shouldn't be missing out on anything. But we had all these different things that we had made, and we thought, well, or I shouldn't say we made it, because we were actually still kind of planning it at the time. We thought, look, there's this extra stuff we could do that we think fans would really enjoy. Can we maybe find a way to create that, make it something that if they want that, they can have that too? And so that's how we came up with all the deluxe content.
Sure. I had this idea before we did the interview that I think I'm going to have to truncate, just because we've been having this wonderful conversation for a while, where I was going to ask you about your history at Capcom and kind of have you contextualize it with the Devil May Cry ranking system and have you do each moment. Like, what was your D moment working with Capcom? What was your triple S moment? And I think we're actually going to do that. What was your lowest moment? What was your D moment at Capcom that really sticks out to you? And what has been the most exciting, the most triple X, not triple X, definitely not triple X, triple S experience that you've had within the company?
All right, let's see here. So it might get pretty personal. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
that's what I'm going for.
All right. Well, in that case, my D moment, if we're assuming that D is still not necessarily good per se, I've had a couple just experiences just where I've cried at work. I mean, just having, rough days and having to deal with certain people, and I've cried a couple times. So that was D.
Is it, not to dig too much, I guess, but is that just like dealing with people at work, dealing with just kind of the overwhelming response that you see? Like, where were those emotions coming from?
I think I get pretty excited about stuff, and the kind of flip side of that is that I'll take things personally sometimes.
Sure.
When I'm working directly with people. Yeah. Because I really value people and relationships. I think those are really important. So yeah, kind of dealing with specific people. I've cried.
Sure. So on the flip side of that, is there any day or stretch of time or just even singular moment that, like, even thinking about it now just gets you so excited?
Dude, well, I mean, if we're talking triple S, man.
Yeah.
Triple S was being on stage announcing this game with Itsuno-san, one of my favorite game creators. And I'm already like I love video games, but for me, I'm kind of like there's all kinds of different kinds of otaku, right? I'm kind of a game developer and game development otaku.
Sure.
So I love like getting to interact with the people that made the games, getting to hear their stories. And so being on stage at E3, which is already it's something that almost nobody gets to do, even in the industry, right? There's very, very select number of people that get to actually be on an E3 stage. And for me and Itsuno-san to go out there to that reception for Devil May Cry 5, for this game that we had been working on for 3 years at that point, it was, I mean, that's a highlight of my life, man. I could die happy now, know?
And I have to imagine working on it all this time, like, no matter what, that would be kind of a release, just being out on stage. But I imagine you had to be very quiet about it, very like, I can't talk about what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, and sort of have that kind of reveal, I guess, must have just felt incredible.
Oh yeah, that was great. I mean, that was certainly, it's like you said, up until then, it's very much like, well, we can't talk about this in front of anybody because, it needs to be a surprise, you know? So finally being able to go, oh, I don't have to call it S&G anymore. I can call it Devil May Cry 5. S&G was the code name that we used. So that was great, yeah. That was a nice release. Like, oh, great. I don't have to, like, be as secretive about this now. Yeah.
Do you ever find yourself accidentally referring it to its code name?
All the time.
Okay.
All the time. All right. I still call it S&G all the time, yeah. We do that with a lot of our games, too. Maybe I shouldn't say this. I'm not gonna say. Okay, sorry.
We got really close. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for having this conversation about Devil May Cry, about Capcom, about working in games, and thank you so much for being willing to get a little bit personal. I think that adds a lot to it.
Appreciate it. No, thanks a lot.
And yeah, we'll have plenty more Devil May Cry things coming. We're excited about the game. We want to cover it. We'll have a lot more on the way. Thank you so much.
Now that's a familiar tune. Do you have any idea how many times I've heard that exact same line? This is special.